Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's edition of HR Mentorship Learning Series. My name is Oluyemi Adeosun, and tonight we'll be looking at the topic HR Research and Analytics Made Simple, using data for smarter people decisions. Our facilitator is a second timer. All right. When you welcome first timers, you tell them to come again. So we're excited, delighted, elated to have Mercy come back. All the same, I'll still read her profile very briefly. Mercy is a global compensation analyst and HR research consultant with expertise in compensation strategy, total rewards, and HR analytics. She has supported NGOs, private sector organizations, and development agencies working in over 40 countries to design competitive pay system, conduct market benchmarking, and apply data-driven HR solutions. She holds a master's in human resource management from the Liverpool John Moores University and has completed World at Work Total Rewards Management certification, and a member of World at Work Total Rewards Association. As the founder of the Citadel Center for Human Resource Research and Advisory, Mercy combines global best practice and local insights to strengthen HR system across Africa. Alongside her consulting and research work, she also facilitates trainings like she's doing today, sharing practical evidence-based tools that HR professionals can immediately apply in their organizations. Speaking to us tonight on the topic HR Research and Analytics Made Simple. Let's welcome Mercy. You have the floor, my sister.
Thank you so much, Dr. Oluyemi. I'm very excited to be speaking again. I got such positive feedback from the last session I had, which encouraged me to want to do this. Just to add, one of my goals in my organization is to spread the knowledge. So because I have worked globally, I have seen that there's a huge gap in Africa. So I have a desire to encourage organizations and people to make data-driven decisions. That's why we're going to be talking about HR analytics and HR research. So I'm going to be starting now. Okay. All right. Today we're going to talk about why this matters. Like why do we have to use HR research? Why do we have to do research? Why do we have to do analytics? We're going to be talking about the practical tools and approaches, practically, we're going to bring it down to the practical level. We're going to look at case studies and local insights, and we're going to look at building a data-driven culture. And of course, what are the next steps you can take as a HR professional in making data-driven decisions in your organization, as well as for your own personal development. So before I even go into the why, I was having a conversation 2 days ago with, that was yesterday, with a member of the learning of department of CIPM Abuja, and she said something that she was asking me, oh, how did you get your job? And how come you're working globally? And I told her there are some particular skills that are very relevant in today's world, especially if you are looking at building your career overboard. And one of the if you're looking at building your career over the continent, and one of the very, very important skills that are very required right now is analytics. From recruitment, even recruiters have to have analytics skills to be able to be considered for some kind of role. So that's why one of the reasons why I am excited to be having this, giving this presentation today. So now let's talk about the reason why I think, or why it is important for us to learn HR research and analytics. So the business case is where we currently are. I like to ask questions during my presentations. You don't have to unmute to answer. If you can unmute to answer, that would be lovely, but you don't have to. You could just text in the chat box. Can you tell me how many, if you've ever had to make an important decision, like a hiring policy or give a raise, based on maybe a manager says, please give this person a raise. And you just hope that it was the right call. Like, you don't know, but hopefully, fingers crossed. If you've had to do that, I would be excited to know like what the situation was, or you could just say yes or no in the comments, and then we can move forward. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead. You can put it in later. One of the reasons why where we are at now in Africa and many Nigerian organizations is intuitive HR. So we have to, of course, sometimes our intuition pays. So I'm not going to say intuitive HR is bad 100% because sometimes our intuition pays. But we are mostly figuring it out on the job. We are mostly trying to, we make people decision based on guesswork. We make people decision based on best practice, even though best practice sometimes have to be contextualized and we don't realize it. So we just say best practice, but we forget that the people that most times best practice is generated from data from countries that are more developed and more data-driven or pursue more data-driven approaches to HR. And they are the ones that determine what best practice is, because in Africa, we don't really gather HR data. So we are making those best practice decisions in our context, even though sometimes they may not be applicable, and sometimes we're mostly reactive to issues. So something has to happen first before we are like solving the issue. That's where we are at now. And this one, the third point is very important to me. HR is mostly seen in many organizations as a cost center. So they just think all you do is administration. I can't count how many times over the course of my career somebody has said to me, are you not just hiring and firing? What do you do in HR? Is it not just hire and fire? And in my mind, I'm like, if that's all I do, that will be a lot of work. But I mean, it just gives a perception that we're not doing so much or we're not doing so intellectually. And HR is moving to where we become business partners, which is why data-driven HR is important. So business partners or HR as business partners would put us at the table where decisions are made for the organization. So they would be doing like a plan for the next 5 years, and HR has to be there. And it should be like that, but there has to be a business case why it should be like that. So when you're telling your organization or proposing for maybe some employee engagement strategy or something that will cost money, and they look at you as a cost center, like, this one just wants to give or ask us to bring money. And there's no way they can directly pinpoint the return on investment anytime they give money to HR. So these are one of the things that we are hoping to be able to change over time. Of course, these things don't happen overnight. But one of the ways to change this is data-driven HR. If you have data-driven HR systems, they are more strategic, they are more proactive. There's what we do called forecasting, where we forecast how many, this we used to do for annual merit, how many, what's the average salary increase for the next year will be. And then we will model it into our own budgets. So that is being proactive, not waiting for it to happen before we start going about. Imagine budgeting next 2-3 years salaries like 2-3 years ago. And it's so much better for the organization, and they begin to see as strategic. And then of course, because of the strategies, you become more revenue driven. So you're making more money for the organization, and you can actually HR already does that. But when you are able to show how you are making, like with numbers and with figures, it just helps to put us more at the table, as business partners alongside like the CEO. So I'm just going to differentiate between HR research and HR analytics. They kind of work hand in hand, but they are different. So HR research is the process of collecting new HR data within your organization. Actually, it doesn't have to be within your organization. HR research can be collecting data around human resources across Nigeria. For example, there has been a lot of research on the skills gap between recent graduates or people that just graduated university and then the available jobs, the skills that are required to do those available jobs we have. And in Nigeria, it's been said that there's such a huge skills gap. That was because somebody did research and then they found that out. Of course, there have been a lot of interventions. I don't think they've worked appropriately, but that's an example of HR research. That's HR research was, for instance, what birthed the NPower program. So it's a process of collecting new data, not something that is, so you have to design like your questionnaires afresh and then collect data. Usually you can also do this within your organization. So I just gave a broader overview of what HR research looks like, but you can also do within your organization just to understand a specific trend. For example, employee engagement surveys, we do that all the time, poll surveys or investigations. I had a very interesting conversation with a HR representative today, and she was conducting an investigation. And of course, we're talking about how documentation and all those things are important, but that is also a type of HR research. For HR analytics, the difference is that there's already a system that is put in place that helps you see the data that you need to make decisions. So for example, I don't know if anybody here, your organization has a HRIS dashboard that shows you like your turnover, shows you like your cost to hire, shows you like some basic, simple things, you know, where you can just go click. Sometimes is an interactive dashboard where you can like click on the number of years. Maybe I want to measure our turnover in the last 5 months, and I just click a button and I get my data. I just, whatever I want to use the data for, I use the data for. But the difference is that HR analytics has to do with already setting up a system that would consistently give you that data. I don't know how many organizations do that, but I think we can start doing that. I mean, you don't have to have the HRIS system in the sense that it's set up in your organization's ERP or framework. You could start with like a basic Excel tool. But that's what HR analytics is like getting already available internal company data to answer a particular business problem or HR problem. How they work hand in hand is that HR analytics show you what is happening most times, because the data will just show you what's happening. 50 people left the organization in the last 3 months. 4 of them were in HR department, 3 of them were in finance department. The statistics shows that 70% of people that are leaving are from this particular department. And then research will show you why that happened. So for example, if you discover that there's a huge turnover in one particular department, you may now want to do a research into why that particular department is having that high turnover. Okay, so we're going to look at analytics first. The thing is, I have to state before we go ahead, is that you can't really do HR research without having analytics, because analytics will show you why you need to research. If you don't have an already structured system, it may be difficult to want to just start research, because you need to know the what before you figure out the why. Well, I'm just going to talk about the levels of, or the basic levels of analytics. So the first type of analytics is descriptive, which is what it is, what happened. It's very simple. I've already talked about how, like, we can say how many people are leaving or what happened. Then the diagnostics goes deeper to ask why. And you can know that from a sheet. So for example, if I look at exit interviews, I can tell, if you document your exit interviews in a framework, if you just click and you can tell, oh, the number of reasons, the most reasons why people leave is because of XYZ, maybe low pay. You can just easily tell why. Predictive now means you are now becoming more strategic and proactive. You are now saying, if we continue in this way, like if 5 people, so and if we've said maybe for the last 5 months, an average of 5 employees have left the organization, what will happen in 6 months' time if we continue with this trend? You can now be able to say, in 6 months' time, an average of 7 people or 20 people would have left. Like you can be able to practically give a number to what is going to happen in 6 months' time. And then prescriptive is where you now meet the solution. So it's actually quite progressive. You understand what happened, you try to understand the why, and then you can now do an analytics to say, or a forecast to say what will happen in the next 3-4 months if we continue with this trend. And then you can now procure or provide a solution to whatever the problem is that you have figured out. So here I am just going to be looking at this is, I'm sure most of you know, if you've done a little bit of analytics, that is like the basic of the basic formulas that you can get, like turnover rates. It just shows the percentage of people living within a period. Retention rates measures the people who have actually stayed. So it's like the opposite of turnover. Time to hire is what recruitment people use to see the funnel between when they advertise, the total number of days from when they advertise to when the hires like come into the organization or they accept the offer. And then you can look at like the average time to fill a position, which is quite important. Of course, cost to hire. You use ATSs. Some organizations use ATS. They cost money. And there's how you can actually measure the average cost, like what it costs in a month to hire an employee. So you can, for example, divide total your number of recruitment costs, your ATS fee, if you give some sort of transportation for people that come in for physical interviews, you're paying for teams. So you can break that down into tiny bits and know how much it actually costs. So when you are telling your organization, I want us to reduce costs like this and like this, and they can see the actual numbers, they can make sense of it instead of just using guesswork. And then absenteeism rate is very popular. It measures the lost time of work days due to absences. Of course, it doesn't have to be people just missing work because they feel like it. You have to measure things like sick days, because you may want to know why a lot of people are just falling sick in this department all the time, and then of course it's affecting you. Or annual leave days, because absenteeism doesn't necessarily mean when people don't come to work. Like when we're measuring based on time that is lost, that is like measured as lost work days. So for example, if people are now getting more sick in a department, you may now want to now investigate to say, why is this happening? And why a lot of people taking sick leave in this department? And you may just discover that there's a toxic boss somewhere. And then, of course, we can do salary competitiveness ratio. It measures how much or we say is benchmarking, like it measures how much you pay compared to the market. Your market, the last webinar that I had, I was saying how your market has to be your sector, and it has to look at the organizations that have around the same turnover that you have or the same number of employees. But yes, this is what the salary competitive ratio measures. And then we have the internal equity index, which is to measure pay fairness within organizations, within roles in your organizations or grades. So you may want to pull out all the managers and look at how they are paid compared to each other and see if it's fair. Of course, there are other things to factor. So when you've seen if it's fair, the next step is to see why, and you may want to check maybe performance, tenure. Did the person just come in? Is that why this person is earning? Well, there are other equity indexes to male-female ratio. Are females earning lesser than males in this organization? Like there are a lot of things to look at when you're looking at your internal equity index. So the next thing we're going to be doing is to look at the research framework. This is just a very simple 4-step framework. The first thing you need to do is to define the problem. Like I said, most times you can't really define the problem except you have some sort of analytics discovery. You said, okay, something happened, and I'm able to clearly articulate to say, this is what happened, and then this is the problem. The next step you want to do is to choose your method of your research. There are different types of methods which we're going to be looking at for research, but there's like focus groups, surveys, one-on-one interviews, and the type of problem really determines the type of method you use. So for instance, if there's supposed attrition in one department and you want to do a survey, you may not necessarily get people to be honest about what's happening if it's a toxic work environment. But if you are doing like exit interview, if you want to look at exit interviews and one-on-one exit interviews, and you design your interviews in such a way that it will give you your result, you may see that that method favors you more than just doing a one-on-one. So what you're trying to look for would also determine the method that you will use for your research. Another thing we'll look at is to analyze the finding. So look at the key themes, like what is repeated. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but so the way it started in this organization I worked was someone just sent a mail from one of the field offices to say somebody is doing something. It was a very anonymous email. I think they even deleted that email afterwards. But they said somebody is bullying, whatever, whatever. Of course, you cannot use one email to determine that that is what it is. But we now started the research. And then we did, and that's another thing. When you're doing surveys, you have to be very strategic with your questions because 80% of the time, people do not trust HR, right? So they're not going to just tell you, Mr. A is bullying or Mr. B is doing this. Like, they're not going to tell you that. So the way to do it is strategically set your questions in such a way that there's no right or wrong answer. There's no suspicious answer. And then when they answer, you may notice that there's a pattern. Maybe somebody's name keeps coming up. Of course, anonymity is also very important because if you do a survey the first time and you don't, first, if there's no action taken, number two, if there is some sort of repercussion for whoever says the truth, nobody is going to do surveys again. Like they're not going to tell you the truth again. So you have to also be able to be careful around how you do your surveys in such a way that people are continuously going to be honest with you. So when you've analyzed and you've seen that maybe there's one particular person that their name keeps coming up, will help you to do your report, and then you can now make recommendations, which is like to take action, which is the last step. So based on findings, you would have to now develop a clear actionable plan to address root cause. Another thing I would like to say is research is more reactive than proactive. Unlike analytics is proactive. Like you could have such a system where you just want to check your turnover every month and quickly figure out what the issue is and solve it head on before it gets to a case where you're running helter-skelter. Research is more reactive. So the thing has happened already or something happened and then you're trying to figure out why and stop it from happening next time or trying to even improve your system. But most times research is reactive. The most important part is taking action. Like I said earlier, if you do any of all these things, I've seen it happen over and over where we do surveys, employee engagement surveys, and nothing happens in the next 2 months. The next thing is that HR is not trustworthy. We took our time because another thing you need to understand is encouraging people to even do surveys is a chore. If you've worked in HR, it's very annoying when you have to beg them because they don't see it as their exact deliverable, and it's going to take some time. So if they realize that they spent some time doing your survey and then nothing was done, they're not going to do your surveys anymore. You're going to have lesser reach. It's going to be a struggle because they don't trust you. So these are some of the things you want to factor in when you're doing this. You have to make sure that you're able to create an action or take action. Sometimes the actions are not they're not really up to us because, like I said, HR is not at the level in Nigeria. I don't see it yet where we are at the level where we are like at the strategic business partner level where we're making decisions and calling decisions and saying this is what will go. But in that case, you can begin to find a way to discuss bringing leadership buy-in, which is another whole topic. Because for every research, for every analytics, because all of them end in decision making, you have to have buy-ins. So for example, over the course of my career, I've had to work very, very closely with finance, very, very closely with like business leaders, because they are the ones that are going to bear the brunt of the payment, like of the costs in terms of the actual cost. So you have to find a way to get their buy-in so that you can, in fact, I would recommend that you get their buy-in early in the process. Help them, even if they have to push it out, let them be the ones in the forefront of the process, so that when you're making decisions, your decisions actually are going to happen. Because if they don't happen, like I said, get people that will not want to do your surveys anymore. or at least be honest. Even if you force them, they may not want to be honest. All right, so these are some research methods that I just came up with, like I'm trying to share rather. So surveys are questionnaires. I remember one time we were doing an employee engagement survey, and if you ask questions like, do you feel your pay is right? Or people will say no, of course. That one is I don't think I've ever done any survey where people say their pay is okay. But if you ask questions like, I mean, some people can be honest, but if you ask questions like that, they will just say no. How do you get people to answer your questions that are in such a way that they are honest? Sometimes you don't have to like be straightforward like that. You can say something like, would you recommend, for example, work culture, would you recommend this organization for someone you know to come and work? That way, the person is not going to think there's any repercussion if I say no, because I don't want to recommend, So these are some of the ways you have to start looking at checking your questions. You may want to do a little bit more study on these methods because time will not let us dig into them. But the purpose of surveys are just to gather broad data on engagement, satisfaction, workplace issues. Sometimes you may have to make them focus groups. So focus groups are like picking a selective group of people that have like similar topics, similar work experience. So maybe the people in the same department or people in the same age range or something. And then you want to figure out something, and then you can have like a focus group discussion. These surveys are more limited in terms of like qualitative. So quantitative is like measurable, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But qualitative is more like conversational. So in conversations like with focus group discussions, you can begin to get data that is like sentence based, and you may now understand more insights, have more reasons or understanding or perception of what the problem is. And those kind of insights don't come out when you use surveys. Then another thing is the one-on-one interviews. We've talked about the exit interviews, but there are other kinds of interviews. You can have like employee of the month interviews, where maybe you notice that an employee is performing really well and you want to know how, why, what is their motivation, how do they go about it. They would be very excited to even want to tell you, because having an interview with an employee, some sort of recognition strategy. So that's one of the ways you can, pull out conversations from people or insight on. So you learn that this employee is motivated by something, and then you go back and then you can now use it to research further to say, okay, can we check our department? Are people more motivated by this same thing that this employee is motivated by, that makes them work so hard that they're the employee of the month, something like that. Of course, you can also review what you currently have. So once in a while, if you've worked overtime, you will notice that you have to review your policies. The government's regulation changes over time, so you may want to be updating. And of course, times are changing. You always have to be reviewing. So you can have like a fixed time in your organization to say, every 6 months, we're going to look at our policies. Okay, maybe 6 months is too close. Maybe every year, we're going to look at our policies, look at what is outdated. For example, people that ask people to tell them their previous pay, that is very, very outdated, and it gives your organization very bad employer branding. So that's some of the things that you may want to look at to review or update. And then you want to understand historical trends. You can also use that to understand historical trends and turnover. There's something I would also like to say. Okay, so for example, when we're doing recruitment, and I don't know if we've ever interviewed for like an organization and they send like a survey after the process to say, how was the process? Rate us, rate. Now, while they are doing that, it's also a very strategic way to figure out, I mean, they don't take everybody's survey as word, but they try to figure out how to make their recruitment funnel or their recruitment systems better so that people have better experiences, of course, which is good for employer branding. These are some of the things that cover for pay. So employer branding is one of the things that I've discovered is so important because it costs you lesser to do employer branding or focus on employer branding versus paying high in the market because you want to attract best talent. If you focus on your culture, respect, employer branding, that's some of the things that you can use to keep people, in your organization, even though your salary is not like the highest in the market. Of course, we've talked about exit interviews already. Then pulse surveys are like more short surveys, one-line surveys. Okay, so for example, the recruitment survey is a pulse survey, which is what you can use as an example of a pulse survey, or just to see sentiments over like something. It's just, most time pulse surveys are like 1 minute, 2 minutes to complete, unlike employee engagement surveys that are usually very long. And then benchmarking is benchmarking or comparing your internal data against external organizations. So sometimes you compare salaries, of course, very important, but also it's not just salaries you can compare. You can compare your policies, your allowances and benefits, your leave policies, your pay time off policies, your standards, just to make sure that you are at par with what is happening in your industry. All right, please, if you have any questions so far, please, I would like you to drop it in the comments section. Oh, I see 2 comments already. Oh, okay, just responses. All right. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is we're going to look at case studies. I wish I did this in such a way that you don't see the research and every other thing, but okay. So let's say a company notices that there's a decline in performance and morale. I think this happens a lot. This is when the HR team will now conduct an employee engagement survey to collect new data. So you've already noticed that there's a decline in performance. Remember, I said if you don't have your analytics, you really cannot do research. So for example, if you don't have a system where you are recording people's performance, how would you know that how would you know that there's a trend that you need to pay attention to? So that's why it's very important to have that, that system. It can be as little. I started with an Excel tool, I promise you. I started with a database of the employees in my organization, like name, location, age, like something as simple as that. That's how I started. And of course, because I built on it, I was able to grow. So you should have some sort of document, some sort of HRIS that helps you be able to notice when there's a trend, and then so that you can take actions that would apply. And then there's the research, which is to conduct the company-wide employee engagement survey. If you find from the survey and see that, oh, there's lack of opportunities for career growth, because that's one of the things that can be a demotivating factor for people to leave or perform poorly. If you see that, oh, there's no career trajectory, you may now want to know that, okay, you may want to do a career pattern document or do a job architecture that can align or show how people can grow within the organization. So let me explain what a career pattern document would look like in this case. So it will look like what an employee needs to do to get promoted, so that they can know when they have done that and know that, okay, it's time to be promoted. And you as HR too can measure that it's time for them to be promoted. It also helps for us not to make decisions that are based on bias. So a manager comes and says, HR, please promote this person. He performed well last year, or he performed well in the last 6 months. How has he performed in the last 1 year? How has he performed? There's something I've noticed happens a lot in my experience. I don't know if it's the same, but sometimes managers can be very funny. People managers, oh my God. Somebody will come and say, my staff is performing badly, fire him or fire her or give her a suspension or whatever. And then you say you want to check the performance rating of the employee's last performance cycle, and the same manager scored them high. And you're like, what's happening here? Like, how can you say this person is performing badly, but you score them high here? You can easily tell that maybe that's coming from some sort of bias, except they can prove and show documentation that in the last maybe 6 months that the person was last appraised, there was such a bad turnover of events and the person's performance dropped really badly. If they can't prove it, you can just easily tell that this is coming from bias and just know that you can show the manager, look, the last 3 years, this employee has performed at par. The last one that happened to me literally was, we usually have performance-based increase. So we give salary increase based on your performance every year. So some people get 2% and some people get 5%, depending on the budget and your performance. And we had people that performed below standard. So of course, you know how we measure it, exceeds expectations, meet expectations, need improvement, put on PIP. And you are saying they should put somebody on PIP. You put the person on PIP and then you want to give the person a salary increase. I'm like, why? If this person isn't performing well and this is a performance-based increase, why do you want to give the person an increase after you said this person performed badly? So it can go both ways. And then the manager says, oh, I don't want the person to feel bad. The person is married. The person has 2 children. That cannot be true. The data does not show that that is directly tied to him, because the essence of something like performance increase is to encourage people to perform better, so that next year, if they know that if they get a certain amount of, if they do at a certain level, do well at a certain level, they get a certain amount of money. They're going to want to try to meet up to that level, because who doesn't like money? So these are some of the reasons why, like, your analytics is very your analytics, or a way for you to be able to measure your system, is very, very important for you to be able to measure trends or know what is happening in your organization. Excuse me. So in this case, this research would end up with maybe the HR partner with managers to create a career pathing document, a job architecture, and maybe do a mentorship program, reach out to managers. And whenever you begin to engage managers like this, you are buying partnership from them. So they would be more involved or encouraged to be more involved in your program or your intervention strategy that you're trying to do to solve them. All right, the second case study. This is what I don't know how many people do. The problem we found is that there's a high cost per hire and low quality of candidates. So what that means is, like, we're spending so much money and then the candidates we're getting aren't so good. What HR would do is to track our source, time to fill, and employee performance hiring. So maybe we begin to track the source. I don't know if you've seen this thing where you're filling an an application form. In fact, it's one of the latest trends I've noticed. And you see a place where they'll say, where did you hear this vacancy from? Trust me, there's a reason why. They don't just want to, they don't just feel like knowing where you heard the vacancy for. They want to be able to track where they get their best candidates from, so that they can put more effort into that platform. And sometimes you may get the best candidates from LinkedIn for a particular department. For another department, you won't get the best candidate from LinkedIn. So it usually depends on, like, there are a lot of variables. So you can't just say, oh, I've gotten the best candidate in this interview from this department, and I'm going to use it for the rest of my strategy as my strategy for hiring. So it cannot go like that. You have to be able to track over different departments, different job titles, to be able to get a trend. Then you can now say, this is what's happening. So when you now notice maybe LinkedIn performs better than maybe you advertise on Hot Nigerian Jobs or on any of all these platforms, then you may now want to focus putting your interest or your money or everything you want to do on LinkedIn and pushing on LinkedIn, because maybe you have to do like ads or something to make people see it. You may now want to focus on LinkedIn. And then, like I said, that's what the action is. Focus 80% of recruitment budget on LinkedIn and tailor our jobs there. So that's for recruitment. So like I was saying, especially for recruitment, I've noticed that most times global organizations are looking for people that have the analytics skill for recruitment. Recruitment requires a lot of analytics in the modern era to be able to do it very strategically. we have one more case study, which is, let's look at compensation. So I don't know if this happens, but maybe you just notice that there's so much inconsistency of pay across roles. Maybe you look at all your manager salaries in Abuja branch or across the country. I noticed that Lagos branch, their salaries are a little bit lesser than people in Abuja, or maybe a particular department is lesser. And then you look at your analytics, maybe you just look at your data, and it shows that compensation has tracked internal salaries, you track performance ratings, because sometimes, like I said, there are always variables. When you get a what, you cannot make any decision until you get a why. So sometimes you may see that, yes, the salaries are inconsistent, but somebody has been performing badly, so the person's salary has remained the same over the last maybe 5 years, So then you can know, okay, that's that person's problem. And also maybe think maybe it's time for us to do something about this particular person, because performance ratings are also one of our KPIs as HR people. Like, we want to be able to show that people are doing their jobs very well, And then you may look at external benchmarks and all the rest. So from this case study, the insight is that tenure rules were underpaid versus the market, and career paths were uncleared. This caused more junior employees to who negotiated better to be paid higher. So there's this trend, we call it pay compression, when you've hired somebody in 2021, or I want to use just before this inflation thing, because it happened a lot. I saw it a lot. Like, I saw that was the case a lot. You hired somebody in just before the inflation started, the fall of the Naira. I think that was 2023. Say you hired somebody in January 2023, and maybe you're paying the person 1 million naira, and you're going to hire somebody in December 2023. The value of that 1 million naira has dropped significantly. Say the person you're hiring in December is able to negotiate, because the value has dropped, so they're able to really negotiate. They get paid higher. The person that you hired in January, salary was not increased, or even if it's increased, not as increased that the person you just paid recently. It's going to make the tenured employee to be paid less than the new people that just joined, which is very, very bad for employee engagement, internal, like, it is very bad. So this is one of the things that you can track, and then you now say, okay, how can we move this forward? You can create a transparent salary scale. If you are really transparent and good with your internal equity, you can share your salary scale with your employees. I've heard people say salary is confidential within the organization. I hear it all the time. It's never confidential. They share each other's, like, they tell each other what their salaries are. Even HR, we tell each other what our salaries are. So, I mean, you would try to now want to create a system where you don't have to all earn the same thing at the same level, but at least if everybody knows that they are earning within the salary range, there's just something it does to them. It doesn't even matter if maybe you have a wide salary range. There's just a mental note that happens when they now know, okay, I am within this range with this other person, even though they earn higher than me, which is very important for employee morale. So you may now want to review your salary ranges and then link progression to performance. There's what we used to call modeling, where, like I told you, performance-based pay. So while we're linking the progression, we're also trying to bridge the gap between those that are earning really low in the scale and make them come high. So we model the recommended increase, because we used to do it. We model the recommended increase in such a way that the person will be recommended, that is lower in the scale, will be recommended to have a little bit higher increase. Someone that is higher in the scale, even though they have maybe the same performance, just because if my scale is 500 to 600,000 naira and I'm earning 600,000 naira, and someone else on my grade is earning 500,000 naira, a 10% on my 600,000 naira is 60,000 naira. A 10% on this person's 500,000 naira is 50,000 naira. But if I give the person that is earning 600,000 naira a 7% or an 8%, and the person gets maybe about, I don't know what that comes to, maybe 70, 60K. No, sorry, 50, 40K. And then I give the person that gets that is at the 500,000 at the lowest part of the scale, it is a 10%. The person comes closer to that other person, even though the pay you're paying the other person is not necessarily higher. The person just bridges the gap compared to if you put all of them at 10%, so to speak. So that's some of the strategies that you may now begin to want to do in your progression so that people can begin to earn really close to each other. Finally, communication is also important because you may notice that one of the reasons also is that communication is really horrible. You need to be able to communicate clearly that this is what we are doing, this is our salary scale. We're trying to ensure fairness. So let me check if I have any questions yet. Okay, no. All right, the next slide. So what's the way forward? We've talked about how it's important to have our dashboards, how it's important to have like data-driven decisions in HR systems. The truth is that building a data-driven culture is very important. It's not a one-time project. It's not something you can do at once. Even if you want to build a dashboard, so to speak, or a HRIS system, you can't do it at once. You have to keep updating, refreshing, learning. But you need to at least start with small, deliberate steps. Start small. I told you, when I joined a particular organization, they did not have it. So we had ERPs, we had everything, but it wasn't so. I just noticed that maybe my boss will ask me, get me how many people are in so states, and I have to be going to the ERP looking for how many people is in. Like, it was so much work, and I said, okay, why don't I pull this data into an Excel sheet and have it in one place so that if I just want to filter, I'll just filter like Ebonyi, and I'll see everybody that is in Ebonyi State, and I don't have to be checking one by one. You can start from something as small as that, and then keep growing from there. Because one of the things with analytics is that you actually have to have analytical skills, which is aside like some technical skills like advanced Excel, Power BI. You need to have those kind of skills. And I'll let you on a very good, interesting secret. The more you are analytical in nature, the more your communication gets better. I don't know how to explain it, but I just noticed that as I began to do more analytics, my presentation got better, because when you start using Power BI for data visualization, you realize that you have to pay attention to like your design, the colors, what the colors mean, how many text is like the size of the text, like just to look for what is more important to be able to touch the human psychology. But just start small. That's what's important. And you can grow. The second thing is to get buy-ins. Like I said, you can't do analytics without your leadership, because when you finish your research and you finish your evaluations, how do you make your recommendations? Like, how is your action actually taken? You need the buy-in of your leadership, the people managers and the actual leadership. So you can even use your small wins to like pull them in, show them a graph, like, oh, this is what this looks like. And maybe you implemented something at a very small level and you got good results, and you show them and say, okay, we want to implement at this level now, and this is where we need your support. Another thing you can do is to upskill your team and upskill yourself too. You need to learn how to use Excel. Like, I keep saying Excel because that's the basic. Some people go as far as learning SQL and all the languages and Power BI, because like if you want to build a dashboard, but you can even build a simple dashboard with Excel, although it's more manual because you have to keep refreshing manually. But at the end of the day, just do something with like, don't sit there doing nothing. And if you look at it, 80% of the time, these skills are easy to come by, I know there are a lot of videos on YouTube on like Excel use. I think the only challenge you may have is applying it to HR, because there was a time in my organization we're trying to look for a HR analyst to train us. And yes, there are a lot of analysts, but if you look at them in the real sense of analysis, not many people are doing analytics as it should be. Yes, some people are, and I give them credit, but not so many people. So you want to be ahead of the data, of the market, sorry. So invest in learning, take courses if you would like it's very important. I can't count how many courses I've taken. Take courses. Yes, you are spending money, but you are also investing in your future. Like I said, these skills are skills that are they are above the borders. Like, if you have analytical skills, they are above the borders. I can 100% assure you. And I'm talking of as little as in recruitment. Like, in recruitment, they will ask you, can you do analytics? Can you track trends in recruitment? The next thing I want to say is on the job learning. So if you know that you will not practice what you are learning, please don't spend any money on any course. Because if you are not going to practice, the more you practice, all the Excel I learned, all the Power BI I learned is because I was doing it. If you don't do it, all the skills will disappear. You will not be able to do it. So you just have to keep applying it on the job. Very little things. Start with a small dashboard with your Excel. You use your pivot table, do a small dashboard. It doesn't even have to be maybe just a recruitment dashboard to be able to track recruitment funnels from end to end, your end-to-end process, just to make it, just something small. And the more you do it, the more you learn, the more you're able to apply yourself to it. Another thing is to make it a habit. So if you want to make any decision as a HR person, you don't make a habit of just making decisions based on people or recommendation. You look at the data. You may want to say, what does the data say? Even if you don't have a system that is well done yet, you may want to look at however your system is, pull out your data and make it a habit that you want to make sure that every decision you make has to be on what the data has shown. That is a way to start, Okay, I guess, okay, so I want to ask us a few questions to know if we have learned anything so far. Please just write on the chat box. Like, you don't have to say anything. You don't have to talk. You don't have to unmute. If you can unmute, that's okay, but if you don't have to. Well, can we start with the first question that we can see? Which of the following best describes the difference between HR research and analytics? Okay. I'm proud. Yay. Temitope, well done. And Mary, well done. All right. So I'm going to put out the next question. So I'm having to alternate screens because I'm projecting. Sorry. Okay, the next question. Your team discovers that your turnover rate has increased by 5%. To figure out what happened, which level of analytics should you use? Remember we talked about like descriptive, prescriptive, diagnostics, and predictive. We're trying to find out why. Okay. All right. Yes. Very good. The last question. According to the webinar, what is the primary benefits of? Somebody said descriptive. Sorry, it's diagnostic, not descriptive. That's the last question, sorry. For this one, this question 3, according to this webinar, what is the primary benefit of using a data-driven approach in HR or to HR? Okay. Mary, you are on a roll. Okay, thank you so much. All of you are correct. Well, it doesn't replace HR professionals with technology. In fact, my boss used to say AI would not replace people, but people that can use AI will replace people. So just learn the technology. You will never be replaced. And there's a place for, like I said, intuition is not just thrown away. There's still a place for intuition in HR. No matter how much you want to use data to make decisions, there's always still that place for intuition. And also, it helps HR it doesn't really allow HR to make decisions based on, okay, it doesn't allow, of course, that's where we begin to see. Well, somebody said we need to learn from AI. Yes, we need to learn from AI. I use AI a lot, by the way. And I've worked with organizations where in their interviews, they'll tell you to do a research and they'll say, please use AI, use ChatGPT. Like, that's where we are at. Just be able to ref, because to use AI, you need to use AI over a while to learn the skill of like prompting and all the rest. So it's also very important. All right. I hope with these few points of mine, I have been able to convince you and not to confuse you that you can use data to drive your people decision. Thank you very much. So I'm going to waiting for any questions that you have.
Yes, so if you have questions, comments, contributions, please do raise your hands. Thank you so much. Fantastic session as always. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Who is speaking, please? Please raise your hands, please. Fantastic. I see my Oga here.
Yes, so it's my Oga too.
Okay. Our
We work
Oga then.
together. We work together.
Okay, so we start with Temitope, then we move to Mr. Schweib. Temitope, you have the floor, please.
Yeah, good evening, sir.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, sir. So good to hear you. Well done, sir. And thanks for all you do for us. And I want to appreciate our speaker for tonight. It's really it's something I can relate with, and I so much appreciate you for your time. But yeah, can you still hear me? A call is
Yes, we
coming.
can.
Yeah, the thing is that actually, just like you said, we are the one that need to up our skills and whatever. But well, like someone like myself, when you find yourself in an environment where people believe that things need to be done the way it is being done, you know, when you raise the issue of we have to do this and that, they will like, oh, do you want us to go out of the system? You, the upcoming people, just don't want us to be there again, and you just a kind of, even the ERP, whatever that you are trying to say, okay, let's work on it, people are not just ready. So just like you said, that we need to get the buy-in of the people that we really be the one that will pay the cost and the whatever, because everything we are doing is just for the work to get easier. Do you understand? But when you that the majority of the people that you want them to see the things the way you want to see it, how do we go about it? Because it will be as if you just want them to be out of the system or something like that, and there's a kind of repulsive actions, attitude, and even when you want to say you want to drive something, just see people following it, down, like in my place now, we have been trying to do a kind of document management system, but you just see that people are not just interested, even just to sign into it, they are not just ready. And at some point, I was just like, oh, let me just hold my peace and whatever. So what can we do in such a situation? Because a single person cannot just drive something. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yes.
Especially when you meet some people that were like, they've risen through the rank. It's not about what they just get their promotion. Because all those, what is it called, that you just all those case studies, just like at least you can see what is going on, in my environment. But the thing is that when people are not just ready, what do you do in such a situation? Thank you, ma.
Yeah, thank you too for your beautiful question. There's something called, I think what you're describing is called tenure reward. So some people just go up in the ranks just because they're old staff and they're just promoting them and promoting them, and they probably don't even offer so much value. And as HR, you can't see that. The first thing you need to do is to be able to offer some value proposition. Like I keep saying it, but I've worked with really bad people, like wicked person self. You need to be able to figure out what matters to this person. Some people have ego. I'm not like, they just want to be, and I've worked with someone like that just wants to be the originator of the idea. That is all they want. They don't want personal, they don't want it to be like it's you that came up with the answer. They want to feel relevant. Whoever, anybody that is in that position of power, that you know that you need to work with that person, they have a value proposition. There's something that matters to them. You need to look for it and show them how they would benefit. That's the easiest and shortest way that you can. I've heard there's a thing called managing upwards, like how to manage your manager. or like how to manage your leaders. And there are courses around it I would appreciate, because we can't go into the depth of it. It would pay you well to do 1 or 2 courses on managing upwards, because I understand that that is the major challenge with change. Anything change related is that people begin to feel like it's going to either replace them or they're going to lose relevance. Most of the times, you look at it, someone was talking about organizational psychology. It's part of it. Some people don't want to lose that relevance. That's why they are delaying a bit, or they don't want to approve your processes, or they don't want to be supportive. How do you even go about setting up your systems? Were they involved from the beginning? Did you make them feel involved? Sometimes you want to set up a process, just do an email. There's this thing that happened in my organization. They wanted to set up a process because I worked in a global organization. And then they reached out to us Blacks, those Africans, like to reach out to us to say, you are Africans, how would you rather be called? Would you prefer to be called Black? Would you prefer to be called African? Or all these little things are a way for you, the employee, to feel involved in part of the process. So you want to do a new documentation strategy, you want to do something new. Do you involve the key stakeholders from the get-go? Or you wait till you finished and then you now tell them, I have done this, come and see? They would not be interested in working with you. But when you start the process in the first place and you think about it and you meet your CEO or your leadership to say, this is what we've noticed is the problem. What do you think? Sometimes there's a way you can even give your ideas. They say women do it a lot in the family, that men are the head, women are the neck. But you know what I mean? There's how you can give your ideas to someone and they will think it is their ideas. But ideally, you know what you are driving. You are not driving, except maybe you want to also get recognition, which is not bad per se. But we want to drive, at the end of the day, we want to drive our ideas to come out there. We want to drive strategy or growth. We need to go back to begin to say, how can we make our inputs relevant to those people? Like, what is their, number one, I said 2 things. Number one, what is the user, what is the value for them, right? That's number one. Number 2, how early do you bring them into your design of your system? Like, do you wait till you are done, till you start telling them, I have done this? Those are some of the little ways. And I said something also in the slides. You can do little things that do not require their buying at first and show them the result and how it benefits them, and then go for the bigger thing that you initially wanted to go for. I hope this has helped, in answering your questions.
Okay, Madam is satisfied. She types yes in the comment section. Mr. Ashraib, you have the floor. Next, after then we move to my sister, Victoria.
Okay, thank you very much, sorry to call you Mr. Dr. Adeosho, for this opportunity to either contribute or to ask questions. So I'll start with contributions before I ask my question. Yeah, she has spoken well in most of all this data. I know majority of HR professionals, they are scarce of numbers, and I always encourage them. There's no way you'll be irrelevant in this field of work of HR without having your hands dirty with data. I'm using the word of mercy now. Even with common Microsoft Excel, you can develop something that speaks to your performance, your staff performance, your attendance record. Even if you are not using ERPs or all this ERP of the world, Excel is your go-to tools to use. So I just want to encourage all HR professionals in this call. You don't need to have, you don't need to wait till you have ERPs or start to have the numbers. You can develop it locally within your environment, within your office, and be able to use it to speak in terms of data in your management meeting or to present issues to management. Having said that, my heart goes when she mentioned that some leaders or some managers always want to stick to their power, and they use and the subordinates to find it very difficult to work with them. And she has made a very fantastic recommendation in terms of reading books of several books that talked about how to manage your boss. And I could recall I delivered something of that nature on this call sometimes ago on changing boss relationship to mentee relationship. I think I divided about, I think Dr. Adeosun can bear witness to that. But in the long run, we could see that some people, even among those people who want to groom, they are not ready to listen. I'm sure Mercy knows that we've worked together in that capacity before as a mentor relationship in terms of our work. So the question I want to ask at this point is that I want to understand, I want to ask the facilitators, in what way can we, for instance, someone who is not probably doesn't know how to use numbers, or he is not familiarized himself with ERP, or he has not even worked with ERP before. What, apart from Excel, what other tools are available for the HR to make use of numbers to present issues that has to do with people's in the workplace?
Okay, so to understand your question, what other tools can we use to do data visualization? Because what you mean is data visualization, right?
Exactly.
So Excel is the simplest. The others are harder. So that's why I'm like, you have to start with Excel. But there is, especially for interactive dashboards, there is Power BI, and you have to learn a bit of coding like R language, to be able to use Power BI, where you clean your data. And then, AI tools. By the way, since the start of AI, like ChatGPT, and you can use them, although they have limits, right? So you can't use. So for example, everybody that has Microsoft, if you have a Microsoft package, you have Power BI. Just know that. So if you have Power BI, you can build your interactive dashboard. What that means is that you will link different sources. So your Excel tool of your staff, like you can link Facebook, you can link LinkedIn into Power BI, and they will pull the data for you, geography. You can pull in maybe people that are in Kaduna, your employees that are in Sokoto. Then you will clean the data in Power Query, and then you would design a dashboard. The dashboard is interactive. We call it interactive because you can measure, so you can filter if you want to look at a certain period of time, if you want to look at a certain demography of people, like you can filter like that. But I'll always say Excel is the easiest. And for any data collection tool, data analysis tool like SPSS and the rest, you still need, I've used Kobo Collect to do data collection before for an employee survey. The truth is that you will still need Excel knowledge to use any. If you don't know how to use Excel, you can't use any data collection tool. Excel is your baseline to start, and then you can go on from there.
Okay. I hope that was somewhat helpful, sir. And also, anybody on the call can also jump on any of the questions or any of the follow-up contributions and comments and chime in. It's a knowledge sharing session. Victoria, you have the floor.
Thank you, Doc. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, sir. Okay, my question, thank you so much, Ma, for this insightful section. My question is, in an organization where you do more of hard copy, and most of the data of staff under you are with the HRM, like you don't have access to a lot of information, and you really want to build something up. With this lecture, it's kind of, I should just go into practicing one or two, but I don't have first-hand information about those staff under me. I don't know where to start. What I have at my beck and call is just their name, their description, and what have you. But the more important question, more important, what should I call it? Information about them, their age, their salary, and their performance, and all that. They are not under my custody. How do you go about building something? Because I know a little about Excel and I really want to dive into it. How do you handle it? That's one. Then secondly, an organization where, okay, we're into more of hard copy and you keep pushing for soft copy transitioning and it's not just forthcoming because everything is just like setting you backward. Where you're coming from, you're more into online software and what have you. But here they are bringing you back to status quo, like more of a hard copy. It's just like frustrating. How do you handle all this in your own view? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Victoria. I think that's a very helpful question. I remember saying in this presentation that I wouldn't have anything when I started. Like it was hard copy. Yes, there was even an ERP, but we were not even scanning the documents into the ERP so that we can get information from the ERP. So it was a lot of hard copy. I will always say there are always free tools. There's Microsoft Drive, OneDrive, there's Google Drive. At least to a limit, you have a certain limit of like 5,000 gig, or I don't know what the exact limit for the free version. You can start from there. I just believe that there's nothing that is too little for you to start from. Upload all those hard copies and make them soft copies because we're in 2025. I don't know who is using hard copies anymore, but if they are using hard copies, you can make them soft copies. Number one, you can design tools that are in such a way that you can design a form, for example, online. I do it all the time, like a Google form to collect data from your employees. It is free, like you don't have to pay. All you need to do is have a Google account. You can design a Google form to collect all the data that you need to collect from the person. So if you don't have access to their information, sorry, do you work in HR? Hello, Victoria. You can type in the chat box, like if you don't have to unmute. Well, okay, so there's something, so you work in HR, but you don't have access to, so people don't have like a database or anything. You want to start from the scratch, right? Is that what you're saying? Let me be sure. Okay. Okay, good. The first thing you can do is a data collection tool. You can use Google Forms or Microsoft Forms. Both of them are free. I think the only thing is that maybe to know your form cannot collect information for more than 2 weeks or so. I've used it a lot and I think I can guide you. It's very easy. You can use Google Forms or Microsoft Forms to collect the data. You will create a form where they'll put their name, any data that you want to collect, their age, everything you want to collect about them, and send that form out to your employees. Of course, you have to get the buy-in of your HRM, the head, because you can't do anything without that person, I assume. Well, I don't know if that would be a problem, but if you can do as little as that, it will give you back the data. So when the forms are returning the data, it will come as an Excel sheet with the columns of your headings as. So you said that's my challenge, the HRM. But you can do this on your own. Like you don't have to wait for anybody. If you start something and they see the value, they will buy into it. They just need to see how it benefits them directly. That's all. Do you understand? But you can do it with a simple Google Sheet, Google form or Microsoft form, and just put it out. People will fill the form and you get the data that you can now start working with. And maybe that can now be your organization's process. Like anybody that is coming to the organization as a first timer or a new staff has to fill the form. Sorry, not first timer. As a new staff has to fill the form. And that way you keep collecting the data. So if the only thing I'll tell you that is the problem you have is a way to get the buy-in of your head of your HRM, that's the only problem you have. But if it's tools, there are free tools where you can use to collect data. Plenty. You don't have to pay anything for it. You're welcome.
Okay. All right. So thank you so much for joining tonight, ladies and gentlemen. One thing I like with our sessions is that we have a variety of people who join every session, from veterans to entry level. And also, when you talk about any subject matter, you may be an intermediate or basic or advanced, but we are all learning every day, and everybody gets to take something away. I can say this on behalf of all the facilitators. Nobody has ever come to facilitate here or anywhere else that they didn't learn in the process of facilitation. For example, even if I teach something here today and you invite me somewhere in 2 weeks' time, I will look at your context, research about your organization, and then improve the slide. So we all keep getting better and better. So let me see if there's any comments here. So Mary is sending the comment. I'll just read it. She suggesting, I suggest you leave the salary part out of the form to avoid sanctions from the human resource manager. So that's also part of tact and diplomacy. So you may look for part of the data that will not be contentious or that is not too sensitive, and then begin to gather it, analyze it, play with it, and come up with some insights. And hopefully people will get more comfortable when they see the value it can provide. Ladies and gentlemen, you know how we do it when we come to the twilight of another engaging session like this. You have to unmute and thank our facilitator. Mercy has been completely merciful, gracious, kind to us.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Well done, ma'am.
Thank you, Mercy. We are grateful.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Mercy, my
Thank you
professional
so much,
colleague.
madam.
Thank you so much. Mercy had mercy on us. Thank you.
I will not say thank you to Mercy.